So I want to welcome you to another episode of the OrganizedPreneur Podcast. And welcome back to another episode of the OrganizedPreneur Podcast. And this is where I help female entrepreneurs, service-based entrepreneurs, where I help you to get organized, get heard, and get leads using my launch, host, and grow method. I am your host, Aldreama Harper. And today I'm answering another question. And in fact, that's what I decided to do, is just answer questions that's submitted from those who want me to answer a question. So I go live and answer their question via the podcast, right? So this one was submitted by someone who registered for one of my master classes, right? So the question is, and it's a fantastic question. The question is, what's one storytelling technique you use to keep listeners engaged through an entire episode? I've never gotten that question before. I think it's an amazing question, and I also believe that it is from someone who um, is probably already in the podcasting space and or maybe the content creation space and just would like to know more about podcasting, and because they used language that tells me that they're familiar with podcasting. The answer is, to answer your question, I use what is called the hook story offer framework. Okay, the hook story offer framework. And that is my adapted. So I adapted this from the hook story framework, hook story offer framework. Okay, can't get this right. Um, that Russell Brunson created, okay, in his .com secrets. And it's really something that is, widely used. I just kind of adapted and called it the story hook method. Okay, just wanted to kind of simplify it a little bit more for those of you who know I like to simplify things, right? But it's a simple, powerful way to structure your episodes so that listeners stay engaged, right? So they stay engaged um, and throughout the entire episode, okay? And so they stay engaged from your very first sentence all the way through the final call to action, okay? And so I want you to try this out in your episode or your content creation process because it really does work. Now, I will say I've had to kind of tweak it, for my benefit, along the way, but it definitely is something that works. Okay. And again, this is so, so good. So let's just kind of dive in. So the first question you might want to ask yourself is, why does storytelling matters? Why does that even matter? Right? And it matters because people want to know. They want to know, right? Um, because podcasting is not just about teaching. It's really about guiding your listener through an emotional journey that leads to clarity, connection, and then action, right? So you're taking them on a journey with your story. And that's exactly what or why the hook story offer framework works so beautifully. And again, you can go and check it out. I have the book. It's Russell Brunson's best-selling book, .com secrets. And so and something that I've adapted, for my own, for my podcast, right? So let me just break it down this way into three parts. So that's what I'm going to be getting into, the three parts. And the first part is the hook, right? Where you draw the listener in, the hook. Then the story, you highlight a relatable story, right? A relatable change or transformation that took place in your own life. Or it could be a story that, took place in someone else's life that you know about. But the beauty of it is it's about the transformation. And so you want to use a story. So that's part number 2. And then lastly, an offer. Okay. Not always a product pitch, but an offer, an invitation to either apply this lesson that you learned from listening to the podcast, or even or either take the next step, right? If you can master these 3 things, you can keep your listeners engaged from one or from the very first sentence. Okay, you can do that, right? So this is the hook story method. Okay, hook story offer, which is, let me get this right. Let me look it up. So it's the story hook method, which is mine, inspired by the hook story offer, which is Russell Brunson's. All right, there we go. All right. And so let's talk about the hook. Okay. And the reason that you want to do that is because you want something, and in my case, this aligns with um, the way that I do my podcast, okay, or my masterclass particularly, right? So let's just talk about the hook, okay? So the hook is where you pull people in immediately. This is where the listener starts to lean in, okay? You have their attention, right? It's before the hook is before the brain decides to just scroll to something else, right? That's the hook. You want to bring them in, right? It could be a micro story. It could be a surprising fact. If you maybe you never thought about that, or it could be a very bold statement, um, or it could be a question that creates curiosity, right? So mine today is like a question: why storytelling matters. Why does this even matter? And again, it's because people, they want to know. They want to know. And here's an example. An example of one would be like, I almost quit podcasting after 1 episode, and nobody knew. And here's the thing. Um, I didn't almost quit. I did quit. But it wasn't after 1 episode. It was after 12 episodes in my first podcast, which is Organize Your Enterprise. I launched my first podcast about back in 2013. Okay. But here's another example. Another example would be like, have you ever felt like you're talking on your podcast, but nobody's actually listening? Maybe I should have titled mine that one. But what the hook does, it opens what psychologists call a curiosity loop. Curiosity loop. And humans are wired to close loops. We're wired that way. Okay. So the curiosity loop. So that's the hook is designed to do that. All right. So I gave you an example of a curiosity or a hook, excuse me. I gave you an example of that, right? Again, micro story, a surprising fact, a bold statement, a question that creates curiosity. Okay. So that's number 1, the hook. Number 2, the story. This is where you show a change that, and because you don't want to just teach, but you share your story because you want to show a change. I just shared a little bit about, with my opening hook, I launched my podcast, but I almost quit. Not only did I almost quit, I actually did quit. But I've launched 2 other podcasts since that, but we won't get into that. But the story is actually the hook, or excuse me, the heart of the episode, right? The story should reveal a relatable change, because listeners need to hear themselves in the journey. They when they when you get them with the hook, and then you share your relatable story, right? Then you're kind of they're more likely to lean in, right? They're more likely to lean in. And it could be a mistake that you made. It could be a lesson you learned. It could be a shift in your perspective. It could be a client transformation. It could be a moment that forced you to get clarity on something, right? It doesn't have to be long, but it should be honest and emotional enough that listeners will lean in. So when Russell Brunson teaches this in his .com secrets, he emphasizes that the story is not just entertainment. It is the bridge between where your listener is and where they want to be. Okay. So I share with you, I almost, or I did quit for a season, and then I launched a second podcast, and then I launched my third podcast, which is the one that you're listening to now or watching now, which is the OrganizedPreneur podcast. And so, um, and what happened was I realized that I was missing some things. Like I hadn't defined my audience, I had not done any research, there were so many things that I was missing, and that caused me to um, stop, because I felt like I was just talking, but nobody was listening. Okay. And so if that's you, type in the comments section if you've ever done something like that. It could be that you created some content and you feel like nobody's listening, right? Well, then you want to try this method that I'm talking to you about right now, right? So, um, okay, so that is number two, the story, your story, um, to show the change. Don't just teach, share your story. So, number one is the hook. Number two is the story. Number three is the offer. You want to invite them to take an action, some type of action. The offer you don't have to be selling anything, right? But if podcasting is your offer, then you can say, you can have an invitation. Check out my next episode. In fact, that's what my one of my clients does right now. We actually just tweaked it, because we after we had a session, I said, you know what? I think she's on her 25th episode, because what she was doing was that was her invitation to her listeners. Check out my next episode. It airs every other week, and sometimes it'll be like what she was going to be talking about, and sometimes not, but it was very, very consistent. I didn't do any of that in my first go with my podcast. That's why there's only about 13 or 14 episodes out there, and I just kind of stopped because nobody was really listening. Really, nobody was listening but me. I would go back and listen to my episodes, right? But I didn't have an offer, to whatever the next action. I didn't really have a story. I was just kind of teaching. So there was a lot of things that was missing. Okay. Um, so invite them to the next action, the next step, whatever that is. And again, that could be check out the next episode, um, or it could be something like ask yourself this question before you hit record. Okay, it could be, um, it could be download the worksheet in the show notes, or it could be come join us inside the masterclass. So it could be any of those things, right? But you want to have some type of invitation to the next step, right? Because here's the thing, when we're talking about, the story and the hook and, the invitation, the listener needs some type of closure. That's why this works. The brain needs closure. Your listener needs a resolution. They want some type of resolution. And the offer does that. The offer gives them clarity on what to do next, because otherwise they're not going to do anything, right? And so this is how you improve your retention and conversation. So here's how you can use the hook story offer in your next episode. Going to break this down really quickly here. So you want to repeat this process, and this is something that you can use immediately. Okay. Step one, write your hook. Okay. Something that sparks curiosity, relatability, or tension. Okay. That's number one. Number two, tell your story. Tell your story. Okay. Keep it simple, make it emotional, but focus on the shift. Okay. Hopefully I've done that. And then number three, make your offer. Tell them what to do next, what to do with this that you've just learned. Okay. This is how you keep listeners engaged from beginning to end, and how you can turn your podcast into a lead generation machine. And why this works is because there's psychology behind it. The hook story offer works because it aligns with how the brain processes information. The hook grabs their attention and releases dopamine. Okay. The story builds trust and connection. The offer gives clarity and direction and satisfaction. Okay. And when you follow this rhythm, the listeners will stay longer, they'll learn better, and they'll remember more, and they will take action. This is how you grow your audience and your business. So the registrant, and I'm not going to call out the person's name actually because I don't remember, but I wanted to make sure that I answered their question on this episode. The registrant who asked, "What's the one storytelling technique I use to keep listeners engaged through an entire episode?" This is it. It's the hook story offer framework that I've adapted to what I call the story hook method. All right. It's a simple and powerful way to structure your episode so that listeners stay engaged from the very first sentence all the way to the final call to action. Okay. So now here's my call to action. If you want more support from my launch, host, and grow method, and you want to build a podcast that leads, that brings you leads on autopilot, I can't even say it, then you want to check out the show notes, or in the description there will be a link where you can go and go to the site, and you can get a complimentary strategy call. That's my invitation. It's complimentary. There's no sales pitch. There's no anything like that, but you can get on my calendar. So I want to leave you with this one scripture from Proverbs 16:24, and it says, "Gracious words are a honeycomb." This is the NIV version. "Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones." So let your words and and the stories that you share bring healing, clarity, and transformation to everyone that listens. All right. So until next time, stay organized, stay inspired, and stay committed to your calling. I hope to see you next time. I'll be jumping on live. And again, if you want to jump on a complimentary call with me, then you want to check out the links in the description. You can also watch this episode on any podcast platform that you listen to to your podcast on. Okay. All right. Have an amazing day. Have an amazing week. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye bye.